Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another photo mishmash. This one being broadcast live November 6th, 2019. I've got my good friend David Carr co-hosting right here. He's actually next to me. I can touch him.
That's right.
And that's not awkward at all.
Not a hologram. This is like I'm in the flesh in Seattle.
And so that's awesome for you. You're doing a little West Coast tour, and you just happen to be here on the day that we're shooting this. And so I thought you'd sit down here and chat like we usually do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to not have to connect all these computers across the globe through satellites.
Yes, but we did joke a little. If you've watched any of the past mishmashes where David has been on, you know that he sounds fantastic. A little bit of a musician background. You've got a really nice microphone. Plus, you just have that nice speaking voice.
Oh, thank you.
So even though he's in person, he might not quite sound as good as he has in the past.
I know.
That's all me. That's my
kicking
fault.
myself for not bringing my microphone with me. I didn't have room in my luggage.
I understand. Yeah, that's okay. It's just this one show, so we'll make do with this little guy right up here.
Do.
This is that weekly show where we sit down and chat with you about all the week's photo news. Look at your Lightroom. Look at your pictures in Lightroom, giving you some tips and tricks on how to take them to the next level, and chit chat about whatever we kind of generally like to.
Sure.
I mean, we got new gear on the table, newish for you, brand new for me. I teased in Instagram videos what was in the box. It is a Viltrox 85mm f1.8. So we'll talk tiny bit about very first impressions. I literally put it on my camera about 5 minutes ago. So
it's very first impressions.
Very first impressions. Yeah. It's a lens. You have the Z6 on the table, which you've been shooting with for a while now.
I do.
But you have a lens that's fairly new to you?
Yeah, the 50mm 1.8S. It's been around for a while in the Z system, but new to me.
Mm-hmm. In the show, I want to talk because right now we've got the Sony a7 III had a price drop. Nikon Z6 had a price drop a couple of months ago. The Canon EOS R has a price drop. Some of these can be considered price drops. Some of these can be considered holiday discounts. Some of these can be considered just whatever, I don't know, third category to round them out.
What they should have been priced at to begin with.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
Yeah.
And they're all almost exactly the same price now. I did some math and some research last night. I want to share my thoughts on how they're selling, which ones I think are going to continue to sell really well through the holiday season. We're going to chit chat about a few other Black Friday deals. And of course, talk about this camera on the table too. Why is this on the table? We got all that and much more in today's show, but just real quick, I want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is where I have chosen to build and run my website, not only my portfolio site, but also PhotoRec TV. Simply because it is so dang easy to create a beautiful website. You can create a beautiful website, gallery, online store, and so much more. You can build a whole community on Squarespace, and you can save 10% off your first purchase by going to squarespace.com/PhotoRecToby. No, this time it's PhotoRec TV. Sorry. I think you run a site on Squarespace as well.
I do. I have 2 sites on Squarespace.
Nice. Yeah. And you've been happy with it?
Yeah, very much so. I will say I'm a slow learner with some of those kind of things. And so a lot of times I overthink things, and Squarespace is so simple. It's almost like you have to just kind of go with your gut with it. It's really, not that there are complexities, but that's going to be with anything. I really love it. It's worked really well for me.
Cool. Yeah, I've been very happy. I used to run mine on WordPress, and I don't want to badmouth WordPress, but at the same time, I spent a lot of time, energy, and money making sure it was safe and secure all the time. And I just don't do that anymore.
No.
I sleep better at night with Squarespace. So there are show notes right down links below this video, and in that is a link to Squarespace. You go check them out, and they give you a free trial with no credit card required. So you can try it out without that worrying about forgetting to cancel it and being charged. No, when that trial is over, if you want to continue, then you give them your credit card. I just like a business that works that way.
Yeah,
that's
too.
Nice.
That's honest.
I also want to say hello and thank you to all the chat room folks who have joined us live. It's always nice to have you along. Many of you are PEN members. That's the Photo Enthusiast Network. That's a great community of folks that we have just kind of gathered together and have this really awesome place of educational photography learning, tons of video content, new articles, new content every single week. And to give you an idea of stuff that went out in this past week, there was a Tuesday tip from Steve all about competing elements. You know, when we take a picture, sometimes we are very focused on our subject and we're looking through that viewfinder and all we see as the photographer taking the picture, all we see is the subject. Mm-hmm. We don't necessarily notice other stuff that's going on all around it. When you put that in front of somebody, they can easily be distracted. Maybe there's a bunch of sky in the shot, or maybe there's some bright object over here or over here. Steve really nicely lays out exactly some of the things to think about as you're taking the picture, and of course some of the things to think about as you're editing to really make your subject be the only really strong object in the frame and not be competing with other things as well. That's good. You use that term, I love, border patrol.
Yeah, I heard that term years ago from some friends of mine when I was first starting in photography. Some guys who'd been doing it for a while, and they told me, you know, like, just start with the borders of your photo, like really look and make sure that the edges are clean, or at least like nothing too super distracting, and you know, kind of work your way in, you know, or at least at some point make sure that you're looking at the edges. And that's one thing I see a lot when I review photos or when I look at other people's shots, if they want some commentary on it, is I see little distractions and little things. I'm like, you know, why don't you crop that out, or why don't we take it out in Photoshop? Or better yet, if you're able when you shoot to just not have it there to begin with, that's even better. So, but we all do it, and it's very easy to let these little distractions creep in, and just got to be mindful of it.
Yeah. And another new piece of content that I put out this past week is, let's say you've taken this really nice picture of a waterfall. You've done a slower exposure, longer exposure, so that water has that little bit of a silky smooth look to it. Don't overdo it though. But then as you're looking at the shot, you realize that all of the trees and stuff are moving and they're all kind of blurry. Sometimes that can be kind of cool and artistic. Sometimes that's distracting. So I show you quickly how to sandwich a fast shutter speed that freezes all of the trees and a slow shutter speed. Excuse me, I'm getting choked up talking about it. That sandwiches it together and gives you the best of both worlds. And it teaches you a little bit about Photoshop layering, which I know people get a little nervous about layers in Photoshop. It's really not too complicated, and it walks you through doing that as well. So if you're not already a member, you can check that out, photorec.tv/pen, to learn more. Other real quick things before we get into the kind of the bulk of the show. One, I am doing 2 tours in Zion National Park next year. This is a longish, or I should say a couple of days. And the highlight of the trip is hiking the Narrows and photography in the Narrows. So I'm just going to share real quick. One of my tours has sold out already, but there is still room in the second. And this is the kind of views that you see in there. And it's just absolutely stunning, gorgeous, beautiful place to hike and to take pictures of. So if you're interested in that, that link is also in the show notes right down below this video. Go take a look. We also have some awesome potential for astrophotography. Every single time I've gone to Zion, I've been able to get some nice pictures of the stars. So it's just a really, really cool experience. And I just invite you along if you're interested. It's October of next year. Tour 1 sold out. Tour 2 has like 3 or 4 spots left, so not too many. If you're interested, go hit that registration link and we'll talk. Other quick things to share about, we also have the Bodie Tour. So I don't know. Have you ever been to Bodie? It's in California. It's an old ghost town. I've actually never been before. I'm really excited about this tour. David McKay is putting this together. Here's what's special about it. Anybody can go to Bodie during the daytime. It's run by the National Park Service. It is closed at night. You're just not allowed to go there. But they have started to allow for photography groups, special permission, 1 group per night, go and do photography inside and around the buildings. Sorry, at night you're not inside, but you're around the buildings, doing astrophotography, light painting, and all kinds of cool stuff. So you, with this small group, it's going to be a very small group. We're going to be in and around these old buildings, and it's just going to be us. So that's really cool as well. It sounds like there's a ton of interest. We'll probably do 2 tours, but if you want to be on this list and you haven't heard about this yet, if you're not a Pen member, you haven't seen David post about it, just simply email hello@mckaylive.com and say, please, I want to do the Bodie Tour, and he'll make sure you get first notice. In a day or two, that registration will open up. So you want to be on that first list. They will sell out incredibly quickly. And I just wanted to make a mention that there's a deal today at B&H Photo for the Tamron 28-75 f2.8 lens. This is for Canon and Nikon, so this is not the newer 28-75 for Sony. This lens is an excellent value at its normal price, but today it's $369, I think is the price. And it is a fantastic budget lens that gets you f2.8. It's sharp across that range. And so if you're on a severe budget and you're looking for a versatile event photography or portrait photography lens, it's really hard to beat that. So again, link in the show notes right down below. I think that's everything that I need to say about all of that opening, beginning stuff. Again, chat room, I want to say welcome to you. Brian has been to Bodhi at night and said it was wicked, wicked awesome. And Pam's asking when that'll be. It'll be at the end of May next year. There will also be, we'll be shooting at Mono Lake, sunrise, sunset, one of those two, I can't remember, doing some astrophotography, of course, at Bodhi, and there'll be editing built into the workshop as well. So it's really kind of a nice full-featured workshop. It's going to be a cool experience. So
sounds amazing. I was actually asked if I wanted to be a part of that, and I'm going to be gone that weekend, so bummer.
That is a bummer. That is a bummer.
Next time.
Next time. I think we'll probably find that it's just so awesome that we're going to probably make it a little bit more of a regular tour.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
You can go scope it out for us, and then we'll see what happens.
All right. Before we get into the gear and talking about the gear on the table, we like to dive right into the Lightroom section of this because it is some of our favorite part of kind of this whole show. And that is pen members have submitted to us an image or two that they need a little help with and want to have get a little feedback on and get some editing tips. So I'm going to share my screen, and I have to share the entire screen for this to make work. And then we get a little bit what is that, Inception like there. But all right, first up, I think it should be working coming up there in just a second, is this shot from Andrew of a nice ceiling dome. And I don't know, this looks a little Parthenon-ish, but it's not open at the top, so I don't think it is. I don't know exactly where this is, but this is a pretty cool shot.
Yeah, definitely.
First thing I'm going to pop over to develop, and I see that Andrew, you did make some adjustments already. You sent us a D&G. You lowered the saturation, which I think was a good call. I almost wonder, does it need to be color at all? David, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to see, especially with something like that where there's kind of an architectural element to it, I do like to see what a black and white version would be. It already hints at black and white. But look at that. Yeah. Pretty cool. I do like that you desaturated and left it as fairly one tone. I mean, it's got other tones in it, but it's it's not like a multicolored image. Yeah,
I like the black and white. I don't necessarily have anything against the color, but just the kind of little bit of rosy bit there. I don't love as much. So the black and white just feels clean to me.
Yeah, there's such a repetitive thing in this photo, which is what to me makes it cool. You just shot some architecture and you shot it at an angle that has I don't know, it's just appealing. It's kind of got this abstract quality to it. So putting it in black and white, in my opinion, kind of complements that because it's got this repetitive thing. It's very simple. It's almost like there's not a lot going on. So like having fewer colors almost adds to the drama of that. I mean, that's just my opinion. That's how I see it.
No,
there's no right or wrong there, but
no, you're right.
Okay, good. If Toby says I'm right, I'm right.
No, I think I agree.
Yeah.
And Andrew, I see that you're commenting that the center window is what is kind of stressing you out because it clearly is very bright. And this is something typically we run into on workshops and talking to people. I know that Steve has a great tutorial on pen about how to kind of balance interior and exterior lighting. There's a couple different options to that. Most of that we're past that point though, because let's just see. If we bring highlights down, is there anything recoverable? Not within the realm of still looking good. We start to see maybe some cloud or something that's outside that window, but obviously we just destroy too much of the image. I don't mind it being bright. It's not really an important enough part of the image that I need to see that there was a blue sky out there or puffy white clouds or anything like that. I think that these architectural lines really kind of mirror the darker gray inside, and that all works pretty nicely.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's, I have in the past gotten hung up on things like that where something is a lot brighter, you know, but it's natural. That is very natural. That's how it would have looked. I mean, if you're just looking up and the sun was shining through, it's going to be very bright. And, you know, yeah, if you were to go in and like just mask that area and paint it darker, it's just going to look wrong in my opinion. It just won't look correct. You know, if you were to go back to the same spot and shoot the same photo, maybe try one underexposed to where you do preserve the detail in that highlighted area, and then see what you can do to bring up the shadows elsewhere, or do 2 shots, 3 shots at different exposures and try to blend them, you know, sort of in an HDR kind of way. You could do that, or different layers in Photoshop. But I wouldn't fret too much about that. I think it looks pretty great as is. And yeah, you added texture and clarity. Yeah, I was going to say that I think that adds a nice.
Yep, I added a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity, and I brought the shadows up just a touch.
Yeah.
Just to kind of really let us make sure we're seeing all the way out to the edges where it does get a little bit darker away from that center window. But I think it's a really nice shot. The only thing else that I might do is very carefully. Oh, you already did some cropping. I might very carefully figure out how to make this as symmetrical as possible.
Yeah, I was gonna
say in that. But otherwise, I really like this.
Yeah, it's cool. What's cool about a shot like this is, so like this building was there. You didn't build the building. You didn't design it. It was there, and you just happened to be there with your camera. So it's like, as photographers, a lot of times we can't take credit for what we're seeing or what we're showing you, but we can take credit for how we're showing it. And you know, so yeah, somebody else built this building, but you found an angle that just was cool. Like, you're like, this is cool architecture. I want to show off a certain angle of it, and this might be something that I would sketch on paper or draw, or, you know, just something that would be sort of coming from my imagination. And so I love being able to find those things that already exist and just kind of, it's like you're tipping the hat to it as a photographer.
Yeah. Nicely done. All right, we're going to move on. Chris has this, I don't know where, Oregon lighthouse.
Oh, wow.
And I love the light rays that we're getting out of it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that lighthouse basically being dead centered?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it could be off to the right a little more. I think that could help it. Because you do have some information off to the right that is sort of unnecessary. I mean, I think that helps. You know, it might be a matter of different, I was going to say maybe a narrower shot. I encourage you guys, when you have a shot like this, to play with a bunch of different crops. Just kind of keep working it until it feels like it's just kind of right, you know? Yeah, to me that starts to get a little more just compositionally, I think, where it should be. It's a tough call on stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a beta question. I think that I didn't love it dead center.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it was neat because the rays were coming out, but I think with this crop and being kind of mindful about where that right-hand ray ends, I think is a little bit stronger.
Yeah, I agree.
And then I'm just going to do a graduated filter across the bottom here that just maybe evens out. I don't like that it's kind of brighter in the foreground. I don't know where that's coming from.
Yeah, I was wondering if there were like car lights or something going on here.
Something like that.
I mean, something is clearly lighting the structure up.
And then while we're down there, we can just make it a little more green across the bottom, across that grass. Maybe not so much there. And I don't know. I often will just try to warm it up a little bit like that. Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. Sometimes I have to decide, is something on my monitor or is it on the actual image itself? Oh yeah, so now we got this one stick just catching a little bit of light. So I'm going to get my spot removal tool and size it just big enough and put it over top of that and see that it did an okay job. Maybe we'll stick it over here somewhere. And now we'll wait for my Lightroom to catch up. Because as David and I were talking before this show, you know, Lightroom isn't always the fastest. Mine seems especially slow these days. But yeah, I think that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I definitely do. Here's a cool example of like you got a great shot there. Sometimes you just have to kind of bring it to completion in your editing, and it's so cool what can be done after the fact. I mean, there are so many places you could go with it. You could go black and white and do something that's got this very like dramatic look to it, you know. Or you just play with the color, or you know, I don't know, but I think yeah, that's kind of nice when it gets a little warmer. Yeah,
I was just thinking as you were talking about the black and white, I felt like there was a little bit of a cool cast on the white itself that I wanted to battle back.
Definitely, yeah.
And so I warmed it up just a little
Plus
bit.
the light that's coming out of the the top now is more warm and has that glow to it.
Yeah, I'd love to see a shot. I've never gotten a shot like this. I've seen a couple come across my feed in the last few weeks. Some with some stars in the background would be pretty cool as well. I think it might be a little tricky to balance, but that's neat. All right, we're going to move on. Andrew's got another one called SS Factory, and this one has a lot of neat texture. It's got the kind of rusty metal, a little splash of nature making its kind of there. The first thing that I think about, the first thing I think about when I look at an image like this is I think about transform tool and guided, because I feel like the front of this building is leaning, not because of its age, but because of just the angle and the focal length it was shot at. So I'm going to run the guided transform tool on here. Oh, and maybe you had already. Let's see. And I'm going to run, click this little guy, and I'm going to run down the corner here and maybe down this corner, just telling it that those should be straight. And then see if I can find a vertical line. Maybe, this roof here that I want to be vertical. That didn't make a big difference, did it?
Not huge, but it's definitely worth exploring things like that. It's, sometimes you can look at an image and be like, there's something I just want to see different, or there's something that's not quite right. I can't figure out what it is. And so by experimenting with those types of things, our eyes are trained to see things parallel or at least level and plumb and all that. Now that doesn't mean there isn't a place for shots to have an angle to them, but typically with something like this, you wouldn't have been going for an angle. You're trying to show sort of true vertical, true horizontal, and so it might sound like nitpicking, but I think it's worth exploring those things sometimes as you go into your editing.
Yeah. And then Andrew, I knew you posted this in our Pen community group too, and you were stressing a little bit about the clouds, similar to the circle in your last image, about it being bright and just a little bit over bright. And I think have you thrown a graduated filter over those?
Looks like there's something going on.
I think that they are just overexposed enough that we've lost that detail. That's what I think. Because even if we bring the highlights all the way down, they still stay bright and washed out.
Yeah.
So I do agree that they're a little distracting, but not terribly so. I might try decreasing the texture up in there a little bit, and I might also decrease dehaze just to see if I can. It's not really working though. It's not really doing what I want. Just to see if I can kind of de-emphasize that brighter area up there.
There are places you could take that in Photoshop. I mean, you could go in and basically paint out those overexposed areas, replacing them with some of the other areas of blue and white. It gets a little tedious, but it can be done. So don't ever take a shot like that and think, well, it's useless now, or there's nothing I can't do anything. You can do stuff. But you really start putting on your artist hat and you have to do it very subtly, it has to look correct, And, but I wouldn't fret too much about it.
Yeah, and I think that's the answer, Photoshop and working on that. The other is to go back, similar to what we were talking about, David's suggestion in the kind of dome is to take those really underexposed shots that are going to allow you to either sandwich them or a single underexposed shot in this case you probably would have been able to bring the shadows up enough that this building and all of that would have come nicely to life without hitting those clouds as highlights so much.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, we're going to move into a couple of fall foliage pictures. It's this time of year. Chris Bartell's got one from Vermont. This is near one of the most photographed farms in all of Vermont. I've been here on this road many years ago. You can see just a hint of it. But you've got a nice little starburst, nice little trees. You got any thoughts on this, David?
Well, I mean, yeah, I love the color. Obviously, that's the feature. You know, if this was just green leaves on the tree, it might not be quite the same. And seeing the sun poking through works really well. I might try to brighten up the road a little bit. I think where I'm struggling is I don't know what the focal point is. I don't know if there's like a specific, like, this is what I'm trying to show you. I think you shot it well. I think it's exposed well, and you know, the color is there and all of that. I just I don't know, because I haven't been there. I don't know what your options would have been at the time, if there would have been a way to somehow show one of the houses a little more prominently. I don't know how you could do that from that vantage point, but yeah, it's hard sometimes because we want to show where we were. We want to show the beauty of it, but you know, you need to have something that is kind of the key. This is what everything's pointing to. And you do have a road that your eye takes, you know, it takes your eyes down the road, but it kind of goes to where you're like, okay, there are some houses back here. But there's not necessarily like the one thing that it's taking you to. And that's the only thing I struggle with from a, you know, that's being critical. That's being sort of like, you know, trying to figure out what could you do better if you were to go back and shoot it again. You could try some other, and maybe you have other shots in your, you know, gallery from this, but yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I think the colors are the key, you know, and that's what's beautiful.
Yeah, I think the colors are really nice. I like the, you know, as you were talking, I lightened the road and also kind of the side of the hill here, just to balance it a little bit more.
Yeah.
I also cropped in because I was feeling similar to what you were saying, and then I kept getting lost over here. I kind of wanted to wander off into this field, and I really want, as I think you did, Chris, people to say, hey, here's this road. That's my only path forward in this picture, you know, both figuratively and literally. And so I think cropping in a little bit tighter can be nice. Maybe even just a tiny bit more. I don't want to take too much of that tree off, but I also I didn't like that little sliver of light still. And then actually we'll show this on the next picture, but I think that is nice. So let's move on to Adam's. Adam's got this cute portrait of this woman and a really cute dog. Nice. She's a tiny bit soft. What kind of shutter speed? 160. That should have been okay.
Yeah, unless she was moving a little or something. You know, which is possible with a dog there.
Yeah, and that was one of my goals this year, was to make less mistakes shutter speed wise, because I found myself in the past trying to cheat that shutter speed rule with moving subjects more often than not, or just often enough that I was like, dang, I ruined that picture because it wasn't fast enough. And to be perfectly honestly, I haven't always hit that this year. There's been a couple of times still where I said, why did I go that slow?
Yeah.
You know, always choose a higher ISO. I know it adds grain, but it's going to make your subjects crispy.
Absolutely. I've made that mistake so many times. And sometimes it's inadvertent. I've actually hit the wheel on my on my camera and like turned the shutter speed down too low, or, you know, and didn't realize that. It's not terribly soft. It's just a little soft. I would suggest in a shot like this, because again, your subject here is the dog and the girl, and so those are like, that's where your eyes are going to go. And so there's a lot of extra information that I think doesn't necessarily need to be there. I mean, the foreground, a lot of leaves, and yeah, exactly what you're doing there, I think starts to bring it in. And and see, now it's almost like they're surrounded by foliage, and it's almost creating like a circle around them, which is really bringing you in. Whereas I felt like before, all the highlights in the sky were kind of drawing you away, and then all the leaves in the foreground were kind of like, it's almost like you're looking for like, is there anything in the foreground I should be seeing? And so that helps it a lot. And then if you wanted to do some heavy lifting in Photoshop, you could probably remove the sign, which I think would really just make it really nice.
That blue is just so different than everything else. It just keeps drawing my eye up to it.
Yeah, exactly. But if you imagine it without that, it becomes, I think, a really sweet portrait, you know? And that's a situation where like you couldn't pull it. I mean, you could have cut the sign down with a chainsaw and, you know, risked arrest. You could have found another spot to shoot it, but that's actually a pretty cool spot with the old fence there and everything. So short of finding another angle, sometimes we have to just shoot with what we have in front of us. And if you feel like braving Photoshop to take that out, you could really salvage that, you know?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think it's possible, but I love that you brought up, and I just feel like we need to say this as a disclaimer from time to time. When we crop this picture, we're not saying go out there and shoot wide and then crop like this. We're saying ideally out in the field next time, you'll be like, oh, I got these competing elements.
Yeah.
Similar to what Steve wrote about and we were talking about at the beginning of the show. Let me really narrow in on what my subject is. And I mentioned this, you know, I think last episode, thinking about moving your subjects just a little bit past the sign, and then all you have is subject in that beautiful background. Yeah, and we say that without knowing. Maybe around this corner there's an even uglier orange and purple sign.
Yeah, yeah, you never know. And that's the thing. Like your viewer doesn't know what you were seeing everywhere else outside of this frame, and so. But I tend to, especially with portraits with people and animals and things like that, unless there's something really interesting that's like far out in the frame that needs to be a part of it, I'm going to always kind of hone in a little bit closer to that subject. If I'm using like a 70 to 200 lens, I'm going to zoom in from far away, get great compression, really isolate the subject. So yeah, just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And, you know, people in chat are agreeing with us. Definitely the sign needs to go. Photoshop is where I would do it for real too, but even just a quick boom like that.
It definitely gives you the idea of like, this is what it looks like without the sign.
Yeah. And then just haven't shown this in a while. I'm going to throw a radial graduated filter over top of these and invert it and make that just a little bit crispier on them. And then maybe duplicate that, but uninvert it and lower the texture so it just softens. That helps. It's never going to rescue a picture that's a little blurry or a little soft, but it can help kind of emphasize the sharpness of your subject over the background.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, but it is a very, very cute moment.
Definitely.
Another cute moment. We've got this family here. Again, beautiful colors. Adam, this is another shot from you. We were talking about this a little bit before the show. We were glancing through these. I think that there was some off-camera or maybe on-camera flash, because I think on-camera.
Yeah, it definitely looks like it might have been
We've
on
got
camera.
those highlights right in the middle of the eyes. And so, you know, if you're going to be doing shooting like this often, an off-camera flash can make a huge difference.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Really kind of getting those catch lights up into the corner of the eye and having a lot more control over your light.
I love that you used flash though, because so the other day, there's a girl that I shoot with a lot. She helps me photograph weddings and she's never used lighting before. And I was really encouraging her, like, you know, she shoots a lot of portraits and I was like, look, I know natural light is easier and it's a tough pill to swallow thinking about lighting, but I really encouraged her to get just a very simple setup and kind of figured out what we need to get. And she used it for the first time the other day and I was her assistant and she was blown away with what she was getting with these portraits that actually would have been pretty good in natural light, but she all of a sudden had all of these new options as far as where she could shoot them. She could kind of pick the location she wanted to shoot and not worry like, well, no, that's going to be too dark. And so I love that you use that, because if you try to imagine this without it, their faces would have been very dark. Their eyes would have been very dark. And it just, yeah, I think off-camera flash would make it even better. But the fact that you used flash at all, kudos.
Yeah. And real quick, just go back. Adam says his girlfriend doesn't let him get too close.
Okay.
That was the last. But Adam, zoom in.
Yeah.
Zoom in. Okay. So, you know, I do this still too today. I often leave a little bit too much room above my subjects, I think, more than I need to. We don't need all that extra space up there. So I'm just going to pull in a little bit tighter. And, you know, David, you kind of hinted at this. I imagine that, you know, if you're not going to automatically print this or give it to a client for them to print 8x10 or 4x5, or that's the same, a 2x3 or whatever, you probably crop to whatever looks best for the picture. Am I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so. I mean,
I'm going to bring it in just a tiny bit more.
Yeah, it's, you know, I struggle with cropping a lot too, because there are these standard sizes when you go to print that that everybody likes. And, you know, it's kind of hard to throw a wrench at a printing company. Like, I want a shot that's, you know, 7x9 or something that's not traditional. But I encourage you to really figure out what looks best and get it there. And then if you're just a hair off from being an 8x10, then see what the 8x10 is going to do. Mm-hmm. But don't feel like you always have to limit yourself. And certainly don't feel like you have to stick with the actual straight out of the camera 2x3 format. Because to me, that can really, there are so many images where that ruins it. There'll be too much information on the left or the right or the top or the bottom, depending on which orientation you have. And sometimes just cropping that thing into a more of a 8x10 or a 5x7. I use the 5x7 format a lot because I feel like it just takes, sometimes the 2x3 format feels like a long image. Not always. It depends on what you're shooting, but especially in like a tall shot, which looks like this was already kind of cropped to more of a, you know.
Yeah. Here's our 2x3 ratio.
Yeah. Which works. Mm-hmm. But there are times where it just depending on how things are laid out, more of a 5x7 format is going to serve you better, or an 8x10, or even a square. Like, don't be afraid of the squares. I mean, the first image of the dome was a square, and I think was an excellent choice for that.
Yeah. And now I know we got different skin tones and colors here, but it's exacerbated a bit because I think she's in the shadow from the natural light. Mm-hmm. So she's really only being lit by the flash.
Yeah.
And so she's a little bit paler and more blue. And these guys are really being lit bit by the flash and also by the colors coming through the leaves. And so I'd like to see them be just to battle that back a little bit. We were talking, let's just cool that down and brighten their faces just a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I've just got the brush tool, and I'm just going to come in here really just a little bit. I'm not trying to make people that aren't white. I'm just trying to match up really the color of the color temperature in the same space.
Yeah, that's some subtle stuff that can really, make a big difference.
Yeah, but very, very cute. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a great moment. Again, this is a lot of times these shots are about the moment, and you got the moment. Mm-hmm. So that's like you're like 80% there when you get the moment. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. And the little things that, if you start getting serious about portraits that are nice, have him take stuff out of his pocket.
I was just thinking, yeah.
I don't know. He looks like he's got a roll of film or something in this one.
Yeah, and then a cell phone.
He's got his phone in the other one. And again, it's not a big deal, but those are nice things that just kind of make the picture just a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Thanks everybody to submitting pictures. As I said before, I know it's not always easy. Let's see, remove that from the stream. It's not always easy putting your pictures out there in front of people, but we like to give you constructive feedback. And that's one of the things that I love about Pen. First off, you have to be a Pen member to submit images to us. Second off, the way people interact with each other in the community is as if they were face-to-face. There's just a really nice sense of community and supportiveness and constructive feedback. So when you post pictures. So if you're interested in being part of that, come check us out, photorec.tv/pen. It's not like the comments we see at some other places we were talking earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
DP Review. I love DP Review. Those guys are fantastic. The comments on DP Review, I feel so bad for them sometimes. It's just a disaster of grumpy people.
It really is. There's a lot of grumpies out there, and I encourage, if any of you are the kind of people that go on these forums and make comments about gear and techniques and all this stuff, maybe the challenge is at some point this week, go on one of those and just say something really positive, just to kind of like take it back a little, because I just get depressed when I read that stuff. So
yeah. All right. We do have to kind of keep to a hard end to this show right around 4. So let's run through some gear news. Canon SL2. No, not the Canon SL2. The Leica SL2. Canon does have an SL2 too. Leica SL2 was announced today. Holy moly. Why don't I have that tab open? I did earlier. It is pretty impressive sounding. Let me share my screen again. And nope, but I don't want to share that part. I want to share just.
I'm glad he's doing all this. I would.
I know.
I probably would have restarted the computer by now.
Yeah, I'm just going to Google it. And B&H Photo has, well, let's go to DP Review. I was talking how nice they are. So
just don't go to the comments.
Yeah, don't go to the comments. Gorgeous looking, right? Here's a couple facts for you. 47 megapixels. It does have in-body image stabilization up to 5.5 stops with any Leica lens or the M-mount lenses that you're going to put on there, or adapted lenses as well. That's nice for video or still photos. And speaking of video, it'll do 4K at 60 frames per second, 10-bit to the card. Oh, wow. Beautiful, gorgeous viewfinder, 5 million dot viewfinder. It, of course, has that top little OLED screen. It will do 20 frames per second. That is electronic shutter, so that comes with several drawbacks. 10 frames a second mechanical, a little bit slower for if you want to keep autofocus going. But overall, pretty impressive, and it's going to come in at a price of $6,000, which when we're talking about Leica and these specs,
yeah,
that's not bad.
I know. I mean, Leica is just synonymous with like super expensive. I actually owned a Leica for 6 months, something like that. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So you might be like, why did you sell it? I found that I just, for what it was, I didn't use it as much as I thought I would. And it just didn't make sense to keep it when I had a good bit of value left in it. They are super expensive, but there is a thing about those cameras that is hard to explain. I mean, if you can put aside the dollar amount, which is hard to put aside, they're very, very simple cameras. They're laid out so simply. There's not like a million different menu options you got to go through that you don't understand. They're very ergonomic, and they take amazing photos. They're very, very nice cameras.
Yeah,
they better be for what you pay for them.
So that's all the good. The bad is, well, we do have a fixed rear LCD, which you've got an articulating screen there.
Yeah.
How often are you pulling that screen out and using it?
Well, okay, if it's got video 60,
4K at 60.
4K at 60, that means that they intend for you to use it for video. And to me, that is, having an articulating screen that's gold, because so often you're not shooting like this, just holding it out in front of you where you can see the screen. Sometimes, a lot of times, I'm pulling the screen out like this and looking down, because that's sometimes the better angle, or it just, I don't understand that. I know that there are like powers that be and accountants and all this stuff involved, but that's just for the user, that is such a plus.
Yeah. And the other downside is these Leica lenses are not cheap. So, people complain about Sony lenses and the new Canon RF lenses, but look at these prices.
Yeah, these lenses alone are more than any of these cameras.
Yeah. And now it will use the Sigma L mount. They're in that alliance, and so you will have some more affordable options, but you definitely need to know what you're getting into when you buy into this. But you nailed it. Not only does it have some impressive specs, but it also has that kind of, it's hard to really put into words what makes a Leica.
Yeah, there was something about the camera. I had the Leica Q, and there was something about the images. They were incredibly sharp, just incredibly sharp, and the color tones were absolutely perfect. And that was, I don't know, it was just this thing that when I go through my images and see the ones that I shot with that, I'm like, oh, that must have been the Leica. Oh, yeah, And again, you might be like, well, then why'd you sell it? Well, sometimes we just got to hang on to what we really use most,
Yeah. All right, let's move on to some sad news that caused me to sit down last night at 10 p.m. while watching the finale of Great British Bake Off and start charting and graphing some camera reviews. I'll talk more about that in a second. But here's the headline: Canon imaging profits down over 50% in Q3 2019. So this is year over year. This is compared to where they were a year ago. Imaging profits down 50%. That's a significant drop. So it's clear Canon's come out with the EOS R and the RP that they're not selling as well as they hoped. And also, I mean, some of this, we're in this transition period, but a lot of it is you've got all of these, you know, DSLRs that just aren't selling as well anymore. The whole Rebel line, just not quite as much. So that led me to do a little bit of research. And I went and charted up some stuff here. Let's open this. So there's no real hard and fast numbers about who's selling how many units of what. But I thought, well, why can't we go look at the number of reviews on these different cameras, on these different camera sites, and be able to make some comparisons? Because I think I did a tiny bit of research. I mean, I Googled it once, and it said 3 to 5% of people that buy something leave a review. So I thought, well, shouldn't that number be consistent, 3 to 5%, whether you're buying a Sony or a Canon or a Nikon?
Seems like it.
Yeah, seems like it. I don't know. That's the proposition that I'm going on. Let me zoom in a little bit here. So I went to Amazon. Actually, I went to B&H first and said, how many reviews are there for the Canon EOS R body only? There's 216 currently. How many are there of the Sony a7 III? 475. It's a pretty big difference. How many for the Z6? 206. All right. Seems reasonable. On Amazon, the difference is pretty significant. Just 59 reviews of the Canon EOS R, 199 of the a7 III, and 60 of the Z6. It's interesting how close the EOS R and the Z6 are in that case. Well, even at B&H, you know, they're very close, about a little bit less than half. Adorama, very similar. EOS R is down a bit though. Sony a7 III, similar to B&H, which makes sense. But the Z6 on Adorama is very, very popular, or at least a lot of people have felt like they've needed to leave reviews, 350. Now there could be some other variables. The science person in me says maybe Adorama sent out specific, you know, emails after people got their Nikons and said, hey, leave a review. I know B&H sometimes offer gift cards if you leave a review.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe with one of these products at some of these sites, they've done that. But
there's a trend there that's pretty clear.
It does seem pretty consistent, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Then
I went to the manufacturer site. So Canon USA, all of this is pretty much USA numbers, as you know, because that's where these places are selling the bulk of their customers. On Canon USA, we've got 42 reviews for the Canon EOS R, which interestingly didn't even have 4 full stars on its own site. I was a little surprised by that. It was under 4. The a7 III on Sony's site, Sony's own store, has 290, and the Nikon on Nikon's site, 174. And then just earlier today, I was like, oh, well, let me throw Best Buy into the mix. 181 for the Sony, 66 for the EOS R, and the Z6 is down there at 32.
Wow, it's pretty low there, huh?
It is pretty low. And I don't even know.
I'm sorry, Z6.
I know. I love the Z6. I think it's a fantastic camera. And I mentioned this at the opening of the show. They're all right about that $1,700 price point, which that's the first time the a7 III has seen a price drop since its release in April of 2018. The Z6 saw a price drop not too long. Did you buy it before or after the price drop?
I bought it after a price drop.
After a price drop. Because they price adjustment, maybe, as you kind of hinted to at the beginning. Maybe that's where it should have been early on.
Yeah, well, and I think they threw in the FTZ adapter. They were, for a while, they were throwing it in, then they weren't, then they were. So
yeah.
I felt like it was right about where it should be when I bought it.
And I made a colorful chart because, you know, I used to have to make charts for my work often.
Very nice.
And I've missed that. So last night I was like, let me make a little chart. I wanted this to be a stacked chart, but then I was running into issues. So here it is. I left Best Buy off since I just added that earlier. But it's just graphical representation of the number of reviews. So if we correlate that to number of bits sold, I thought I put that on here. I guess I didn't. So, you know, 3% of 200-ish or so, that's like, I think you end up at 15,000, 16,000, I think is where you end up for that. So, you know, we're talking tens of thousands of units sold. This, I think, in a lot of ways mirrors what we see on workshops. Lots of Sonys.
Definitely.
Some Canons. And I didn't throw the RP into the mix because that's cheaper. And we've had a couple of Nikon Z6s, but not a lot. So this feels
I haven't
pretty
seen
accurate.
a lot of them out there.
But does any of this matter?
That's the question.
And that's what we were talking about before the show too a bit. You know, all of these cameras are great. You know, they just might not be as well suited for what you need as maybe another one, but none of them are holding you back these days from creating great pictures.
No, they really aren't. I mean, there's a thing about brand loyalty that I know, like I possess that. I mean, for a lot of different brands, for a lot of different things, I just sort of find one that I kind of like the ethos of the company or the culture or whatever. And I won't say that for the Nikon that there's like a culture that I have an affinity for. I think there's a familiarity with it. Just kind of knowing some of the terminology. I tend to be more tuned in when Nikon announces something. I know more about it because I'm on Nikon rumors a lot. And so I'm just more in tune with what they're going to do. And so, but at the end of the day, I mean, and we say this all the time, but I cannot stress enough because I've had these discussions with people on the tours we do and in a lot of different arenas. I've had these discussions and almost debates about what gear is better here, what gear is better there. And it's just funny how we just nitpick the heck out of, you know, this lens is that much sharper than this lens. And it just, at the end of the day, I'm like, we can talk about that for a minute, but then let's go out and just take some photos. You know, let's go out and make some art, and let's don't get so hung up on those details, because there is a whole contingency of people that's all they want to do is talk about the specs of the gear. And I just don't think that's photography. I think that's tech talk. And I love tech talk. I'm all about it. But if it starts to trump my creativity and all of that, then I'm never happy. That's the problem. You're just never satisfied. You're always looking at, oh, well, yeah, I love this, but what about that? Oh, I love that, but what about this? And that's just like you're chasing your tail at that point.
Yeah. I've built this channel on tech talk. You know, that's part of what I do.
Yeah.
I've burned out on it a bit. I haven't burned out on photography. I love taking pictures, but I certainly have gotten a little tired of pixel peeping and things like that. And I'm not to say anybody who does that is negative. And I certainly understand when you have a limited budget, you want to make sure you're getting the best for your buck. But I'm a little tired of it.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, you go out and use this tech that you know so much about and that you've broken down. You go out, Toby, and use it and create amazing photos, and that's what it's for. You know, I mean, that's the whole reason we use these things. We all know this. I think we just all need that pep talk sometimes to remind ourselves that it's not about the gear. It's partially about the gear, but it's the big picture, for, you know, no pun intended, is really what are you doing with it? And if what you're doing is inspiring people, and if it's making you some money, or if it's just at least giving you some satisfaction, then you're using what you need to be using at that moment. And
Caleb brings up the next step in this discussion. We're not going to have it today other than to say, yeah, you're right. I mean, it does matter for the companies who want to stay in business. I've seen a lot of people liken this to kind of the transition from film. Maybe not that dramatic, but Kodak was an immense company. You go to Rochester, New York, and there's just huge wasteland in areas now where all of those plants were, because they did not manage that transition to digital well at all. And so it is going to be really interesting. I think over this holiday season, with all three of these cameras at the same price point, I still see a lot of people saying, well, I'm going to get the Sony. And when people ask me a lot, we have these workshops, and I say, well, what workshops are you doing coming up in the next couple of years? And if they say, oh, I'm going on a safari, or I'm going to Antarctica, where I know you need competent, reliable, and fast autofocus, Sony's the only one that I still feel comfortable enough to recommend in those kind of faster action scenes. General photography, I think they're all really, really good. I think video-wise, the Nikon has some strengths that none of the others have. I really like. And Canon's strength is just that general user friendliness in Canon, but they need to come out with more reasonable price lenses.
And I agree with Caleb. I think you have these big behemoth companies like Nikon and Canon that have been known for, you know, that's been the names in photography for such a long time. And then Sony comes along, who we've all heard, you know, I mean, Sony makes all kinds of stuff, but it wasn't until recently that they really became like a big player in the camera market. But they kind of just snuck into that thing and like took it over. And and I don't know how much of it is that they're just making what people want, but they're leading the industry. And I think I do love the Z6, but I don't think it's perfect. I don't think anything's perfect, but I there are things that I don't love about it, but I have been very, very happy with the end result. The photos and the video I'm super happy with. But I do know that if Nikon in their next offering for a professional mirrorless, if they don't really up the game and compete with Sony, it's going to be a really interesting future for them. They're going to have to wow us in the way they did with the D850, because when that came out, it was kind of like a mind-blowing, like, oh wow, we get 47 megapixels. Oh, we also get articulating screen and touchscreen and all these different,
really nice,
great autofocus, and it was a package deal that shook up the market and became like one of the best cameras at the time. Still revered as one of the best DSLRs on the market, if not the best. And so, yeah.
And Pamela asks a great question. Do we expect lenses for the Z6 to be less expensive in the future? I honestly think the Nikon Z series has gone the right way in kind of producing lenses that are a little bit more affordable and a little bit more what consumers and prosumers want. Maybe even if some of the higher end professionals aren't quite as happy. How much was the 51.8, if you don't mind me asking?
So I bought the 51.8 last week because it was on sale. It was $100 off. And I was like, well, you know what? I know I'm going to want it, so I might as well just get it now and save $100. I think I paid $4 something or $5, right at $500. Yeah. So that's more than you would have paid for an F mount 1.8 50 millimeter. But this is a very nice lens. It's very sharp. It's very, very, very sharp, and I would put it up against any sort of quote pro lens. It is a pro lens in every sense of the word that I can tell. It's focuses fast. It's got, it doesn't feel cheap. It feels very, very solid. I've been extremely impressed with the lenses that go with the Z mounts. I think they're great.
Yeah, I think they're great too. Canon has really nice lenses as well, except so many of them are ridiculously expensive. And the 28 to 70 f2, who I don't want to carry that $3,000 lens around. And their new their new 70 to 200 is going to be a $2,700 lens, if I remember correctly. Very nice, but those are not for the prosumers or the consumers.
No.
We need these to sell better, so that the lenses are made in bulk, so that then the prices can come down some. But I think we've moved into this. These things are just going to be more expensive for the most part. What might help us and save us is some of these third-party options as they start to be made for these others, like this Viltrox, which we probably won't talk about today. I don't think anybody's here to be really excited about, but I'm really curious to know how this compares. I love the Sony 85 f1.8. It is a lens that we're shooting this show with, and is a really nice walk-around portrait lens and just general lens. It's getting a little long, but on full frame, it's pretty nice, and I really enjoy it. And on the Sony, it's very nice and lightweight. This one feels maybe even a little bit heavier because I think it's a more metal construction. It's kind of odd that Sony's is plasticky, and this Viltrox third party, which usually isn't known for the best quality, is a more metal construction.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Their logo's kind of ugly though, so we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, doesn't matter. Caleb, how has the autofocus been on your Z? You want to address that?
Oh yeah, we were talking about that earlier. Thank you, Caleb. For the most part, I don't have issues with it. I don't shoot a lot of moving subjects, not often and not rapidly moving subjects. So I haven't been able to test it at like an air show or a horse race or anything like that. But the only issue I've really had is in low light, trying to get it to focus. I shot a wedding a few weeks ago, and at the reception we had some pretty dim light, and I was struggling to get focus at times. And I don't know how much of that was just that it's the Z, and how much of it was actually just the room I was in. But I did find myself grabbing the manual focus and just trying to get it in the ballpark. And it seems like when I did that, then it got there. But sometimes that can be the difference between getting the shot and not getting it. So hence another area where improvement will have to happen. But the thing I want to say too, when we were talking about like people griping on the forums, this is the first version you know? And so of course it's going to have bugs. Of course it's going to have things that aren't perfect. And that's okay to gripe about those things. Hopefully that prompts Nikon to improve upon it. But we don't need to act like they're just trying to really pull one over on the consumers. I think sometimes it's just that, you know, any company, Sony, I'm sure, had to take risks when they first started putting these things out, and you know, they've done really well with it. But I think we just need to have some patience and know that it's all moving. Here's the thing: it's all really, really amazing right now. Every bit of it, everything sitting on this table is, well, maybe not this as much, but everything. I mean, at one time it was cutting edge, but everything on this table is like amazing. We're starting at level amazing, and we're just nitpicking from there. So it's only going to get better.
Yeah. Let's hit a couple other news stories really quickly. Adobe Max Conference was happening this past week. Adobe announced that Photoshop for the iPad is now available, but without RAW support at launch, which kind of, to me as a photographer, makes Photoshop not exciting. Do you have an iPad? Do you do any editing on iPads?
No,
I don't either. I tried to this summer. I have those videos out about that. I think there is some value there, but without RAW support right now, not so much. They also announced their Photoshop camera that's coming to devices like this sometime in 2020. Oh, and I did want to say that. That's the thing. The next version of many of these cameras seems very far away. So it's going to be really interesting to see if these kind of trends of selling the numbers of cameras, I think Canon and Nikon are going to be in a really tough spot if Sony continued to dominate to the tune of like 3-1 or 4-1. That gap is only going to widen, and that's going to make it tougher for those guys to catch up. Other interesting information, though, I took this out before last week's show and told you about how I was almost attacked by coyotes using the astrophotography mode. I was pretty impressed with it. Then an update came out today, I think, to Pixel 1 and 2 that provides that astrophotography mode. So if you have those older ones, try it out, and 3 too should be coming out. And then I just wanted to get your opinion about this. We talked about it briefly off camera. A school offered airbrushing services for the school photos of 8-year-old children. There's 2 levels of, like, we'll fix it for you. General, like, retouching, or then premium retouching, where they would even skin tones and whiten teeth.
Oh my gosh.
How do you feel about that, David?
I mean, I just did school. I just did school photos for my boys' school. And it was only about 200 students, so it wasn't like a massive undertaking, but it was a lot. You know, it was a lot to shoot. And I actually did do some touching up, but you know, you have to be really subtle about that stuff. I mean, if a kid had really yellow teeth because they never brush them, I mean, I didn't want to punish the kid by like showing their really yellow teeth, so I might have like enhanced them a little, but not to the point where they look like a Barbie doll or something. I just think there's a point where, especially with like, well, really anybody, but especially with like kids, like, you know, that's just feeding this idea that they need to be perfect and look perfect. It's really, and it may not sound like a big deal on the front end, but I think there's whatever is fueling that type of thing. Like, hey, let's touch up these 8-year-olds' photos, like airbrush their skin. Give me a break. I just don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, it's not good. Okay, I agree. It's not good. I brought this out because my daughter brought this the other day. She's like, Dad, this guy was giving away a camera, and I didn't know if it was any good. It is a PhotoSmart HP 618. It's a 2.1 megapixel camera. And my first thought was, well, we're not going to find batteries for it. Well, it takes AA's actually. So I got some AA's here. I'm going to put them in if I can get the battery door open. And then my second thought was, well, I don't know if I still have CF cards, but I found a CF card. So let's see. This could be, again, is anybody watching the show because they're with bated breath because they're like, wow, let's see if this works. I'm probably not even putting them in the right.
They don't make those batteries anymore.
They don't.
Oh wait,
how does that 2 and 2?
You know, sometimes they're like that because.
Thank God you're here in person.
Oh wait, yeah, I think that's got to go down, right? Like the spring is usually.
Oh
on
yeah.
the butt end.
Yep,
right?
there you go.
Cool.
The battery's butt end. All right, so make a long story short, let's see if it even powers up. And then, you know what you should do is David's here for another day or two in Seattle, maybe I'll make him shoot with his camera and post to his Instagram,
awesome.
at least stories. So you should go follow David.
Yeah.
I'll bring up your Instagram in just a second so people can see that. Oh, look at that. Fits in there.
Wow.
And power button. We got a light.
Look at that.
We got noise.
Has a zoom.
Card requires formatting. Delete everything on card. Unable to format. I wonder if it's too big. No.
Maybe there's a firmware update.
Maybe there's a firmware update. I was so excited.
I don't think there was firmware when that camera was made for anything.
Think unable to format. I bet it's a 16 gigabyte card. That was the smallest that I found today when I was cleaning. I don't think I have a smaller CF card than that.
It's an HP.
So, yeah. Well,
hey, but you know what? If you're a good
David.
photographer, you can make something out of this that's good. You know, it's like it's really like you actually should be able to take something decent with it.
Yeah.
You just probably aren't going to win awards.
Let's see. Oh, look, I even have that from when you were on the show before.
Oh, cool.
There you go. Follow David Carr.
Good to go.
And you know, you've got some recent pictures you've been posting. Today was International Warthog Day. You seem to be much more up on this than I am. And it always makes me think.
Well, as far as I know, I mean, I just thought, well, I'm just going to declare that today is International Warthog Day.
You could. And for those who don't know, David, you are a musician as well. So
yes.
What's it like shooting bands?
You know,
as you've transitioned, as we should say, if it's not clear, you've transitioned into photography.
Yeah, I was in a band for 24 years, and that's all I did. So, yeah, this was a band that I photographed about a month ago, and they're all related. It's like a husband and wife, and then their cousin. It's fun. It's cool because I've been on that side of the camera so many times, and I've been like wearing the wardrobe that the stylist bought for us, and that we've had to like, you know, figure out if we even look good in it. And then you're there in front of people who are like watching you, and they're taking your picture, and it's kind of intimidating. But so I try to put their minds at ease and kind of put myself in their shoes because I've been in their shoes, and I enjoy it a lot.
Now, I got to make the joke about the band photos. I mean, do you guys joke about the fact that only one of them can look at the camera?
Yeah, it's such a thing, man. It's, you know, it's funny because we took a lot where they were all looking at the camera. And then as we're going through the ones where, you know, I might have said, all right, let's have a couple of you just look off camera. We're always trying different things, you know, like, let's just see what that would look like. And it's funny because a lot of times when we're going through and culling the photos, those are the ones we kind of like the most. And I think this is one they picked. A funny, can I throw in a side note?
Yes.
So
yes,
this is a band that they're out of a church in Georgia. So, you know, just keep that in mind when I tell you that one of the books over on the left side, there's a black and white book just to the left here.
I need that computer that says enhance, enhance.
Let's just say that book, the black, right there.
Yeah.
It had a naughty cover on it.
Uh-huh.
And I had to completely replace the image on the front of that book.
Was this because you guys didn't notice when you're shooting?
Didn't even notice. We actually noticed another one. We had noticed another one. We took it off the shelf, and I was like, oh, gosh, we can't have that in the photo. And so then I'm going through, I'm editing. Great. I'm like, oh, goodness, I see another one. So I had to literally like throw something else on top of there. So it's
that's pretty funny.
Just a little secret.
Funny. Yeah. All right. I think we'll end on that note. Actually, we have a couple of Q&As that I wanted to hit real quick. Was there any? Sure. Pamela wants to know if we ever have a problem with Lightroom library filling up your hard drive. Yes. That's Absolutely. Why we have a lot of pen videos that show you how to put your library on an external drive.
Cannot recommend that enough.
Yeah.
Preferably an SSD if you can.
Yeah, SSD makes a big difference.
For a lot of you who struggle with Lightroom running slowly and like, you know, your fans on your computer are cranking up, a lot of times it can come down to that.
Yeah. Andrew wants to know, do we leave our Macs running as well as external drives connected and on? Yes, I do.
I do.
Mine back up online, and so I never know if it's finished its backup or not. If I'm going away for a long trip and I know it's finished its backup, I'll turn it off because it's really rare that I need to access it. But otherwise, I leave it on.
Yeah, every now and then you might want to like restart it. Sometimes that can kind of like just kind of reboot things and make them run a little bit better, but I don't turn mine off.
Yeah. Okay.
Typically.
Quick questions. And then I think somebody asked, what studio strobes do you work with? I think I saw you answer that in chat.
Yeah, Profoto B1s.
Yeah.
They rock.
Yeah. Cool. Good. Well, folks, thanks for joining us on this Wednesday afternoon or whenever you happen to be watching this. If you haven't already, hit that thumbs up button. That's just a nice way to say thank you for us sitting down with you and sharing some information. And if you're watching this and you're not a subscriber, well, hit that subscribe button along with that little bell to be notified of future tips, tricks, and videos. Pen members and anybody else who's in the chat room, thank you so much for joining us. And your chats, and I made some of you famous, as Caleb felt like, by putting you up on the screen. Not really famous. 15 seconds of mild fame. That's what I say when people recognize me in the wild, and then other people are like, "Are you famous?" And I'm like, very, very, very mildly. Very mildly.
But you do have a fan base.
Yeah, we do. And you do too. David Carr, thank you so much for joining us.
Man.
It was great having you here in the space. It makes me want to be rich enough that I can just fly out my friends to do this show, because it's so much more fun when you're in person.
No, I appreciate it, man. I'll just have to get out here every week or so.
Yeah, sounds good. Just make that commute. Yeah. And I don't pay him anything, so you need to go follow him on Instagram to make sure you stay up to date and keep checking the backgrounds of those church band photos for naughty bits. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Until next time, next week. Bye-bye.